specifically these ayat, specifically these ayat that we recited, and others as well. وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحِينَ, etc. That we don't lose sight of the fact that we have been promised victory, inshallah. These promises of Allah, these wa'ad that we have in the Quran are true. Inna wa'ad Allahi haqq. Promises of Allah are true. This is that which keeps us warm. This is what gives us our fire. That we know that which we have behind us is a divine promise. Some of the things that we mentioned in our conference on Iman, the first conference that we had over the past summer, for those who were present or for those who accessed the videos online, we spoke of many of these divine promises. One of these were the promise of victory. Inshallah, victory is ours. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا. One is with regards to the Fath of Mecca, where you see that the people are entering the faith in groups, and this is the time where the tide is really turning. Inshallah, soon we'll see the tide turning in the present day, very vividly and very apparently in front of us soon. The homework that we had given last week to the sisters and the brothers was to look at Ayah 132 and 133 of Surah Al-Imran, chapter number 3 of the Holy Quran, and to dissect the words that have been mentioned in the verses, so that word by word we can understand what the ayah is saying. So I will take on that job that I guess certain teachers like to take on, but other teachers dread, which is that I will basically test you. We'll make it interactive. It's not a test. I don't want to say test. We'll make this interactive, inshallah. We'll go through the words word by word, or the ayah word by word. If you have an actual mushaf, it's better. If you don't, then at least if you have the ayah in front of you, please bring the ayah, the two, 132 and 133, and we'll go through them. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay. Brother Ali Mahdi Jiwana, because I know you, the ayah begins with وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ. What does the word أطيعوا mean?
Ati, generally speaking, has from what I've seen, seems to mean obey. Now, based off of what you were saying last time, like it seems to have like a deeper meaning than simply obey. But for now, like this is all I can come up with, like obey. Like they obeyed. I believe.
Ahsant. They obeyed?
I think if I'm doing the conjugation correctly, I could be doing it incorrectly, but I think with the waw and alif in the back, then it would be past tense, and then I know this is a different form of Arabic, so but I wouldn't know the exact translation of this form of the word. But
You're on the right track. I see where you're going with it. No, this is actually a command. This is the command tense.
Okay, my bad.
But you're on the right track with the wow. I know you're going with that. But the original translation that you said was obey. This is a command. This wow and the alif at the end is addressing a group.
Okay.
Masculine plural group. Ati'u, obey, all of you. Thank you. Ati'u Allah wa Rasul. The word la'alla. These words, when you have to translate the words, it becomes a bit more difficult. But Then again, you had a week. So, brother Miqdad, I'll give this one to you.
Salam. Um, based on the translations that I see, it would bring so that you may know. La'alla specifically being to know or to know.
The word la'alla is to know.
La'allakum would be the kum being the conjugation that you may know, you plural. So I would presume that la'alla would be yes, to know.
Hmm.
And this
The
is
word
looking at the
la'alla,
larger.
yeah, the
So this
word
is looking at.
la'alla,
Sorry, go ahead.
you're adding the concept of knowing into the picture. The concept of knowing isn't really attached to this word la'alla. La'alla, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that perhaps there is something that will come out of it. Meaning there's this effect that we want, there's a desired effect, there's this result that we're looking for. As a result of doing X, you may perhaps reach at Y. This la'alla is connecting the two, meaning that perhaps, maybe, you will, whatever, get to Y. You'll get to the destination. This la'alla is saying maybe, perhaps, which is something really interesting because in many ayat when you see the word la'alla, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't saying if you do X, then Y. Saying bring X, our hope is that by doing it you will arrive at Y. Don't think that everyone that does X necessarily arrives at Y. So the word la'alla I personally would translate as perhaps, maybe, so that maybe. In some translations you see the word so that, for example. It's like it's not giving you the certainty that this will necessarily happen every time, but perhaps أطيعوا الله والرسول لعلكم, so that perhaps you will in this ayah turhamun. The word turhamun now, what does the word turhamun mean, brother? It's only brothers, that's a sister. Let's ask your sister Fatima. Kimchi. There's only one Fatima in the group.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
The word turhamun, what does the word turhamun mean?
Turhamun means so that, and then so turhamun from like raham to get mercy, to receive mercy. So it's that if you obey the messenger so that you can receive that or get that mercy.
Receive mercy. Turhamun, there's a waw and noon at the end. Do you know what that does to the word?
I think, I'm not sure, but I want to guess it's something to do with the plural form of it, perhaps.
Turhamun. So as you were mentioning, the context of the word, which is very good. Ahsan. That if you obey Allah and the Prophet, there's something that will come out of it. Perhaps something will come out of it. We said la'alla means perhaps. What is that thing that comes out of it? لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, that you all will receive mercy, plural. You all. Ahsan. You're on the right track there. The word Rasul, should be a softball question. What does the word Rasul mean, brother Ashar?
Salam, bro. Hope you're doing well. So from my understanding, it just means the messenger, like what, like obey Allah and the messenger. What's Allah?
The messenger. Rasul usually comes in contrast to the word Nabi. What does the word Nabi mean?
Nabi means prophet.
Prophet. Ahsan. There's a difference between Nabi and Rasul. Do you want to open that one up? But yes. There's a reason why the word Rasul is used as opposed to the word Nabi. As opposed to the word Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, another word hasn't come. This particular word was chosen. So obviously you might think it to be a trivial question. Well, why would you ask what does the word Rasul mean? Well, inshallah, in the next In the next session, we'll open up the specific of the word Rasul itself, why this word is used. Is there any importance to the fact that the Risala of the Prophet is mentioned? We don't say أطيعوا الله والنبي, أطيعوا الله وهذا الرجل ومحمد. Any other word, we sing Rasul. What's the purpose of the Risala? It's important. We're talking about the messenger and how the message of the messenger has importance in this ayah. Now, we are only going to discuss this ayah, but just because we did give the homework for both, I'll ask maybe 2 more questions and then we'll enter into the tadabbur aspect. The word sari'u. The word sari'u. What does the word sari'u mean? Sister Farwa. If you're speaking, I can't hear you. If you don't want to speak, that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're in the group chat? Sorry. Okay, I didn't see it. Okay, no problem. Let me just open the message. Khair. We'll keep going. Sister Negin. The word sari'u, if you don't mind.
Salam. So sari'u means hasten, and it's in the imperative form, so it's a command. So wasari'u would be and hurry or and hasten, and again, it's a command. It's something with urgency.
Urgency. Urgency. We can't understand urgency from a command, but we do understand that nonetheless it is a command. Meaning it's being, command is typically given from someone who's higher to someone who is lower. The reason why I say you can't understand it, this is a discussion we have in usul, where if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a command, either in the Quran or you receive a command from the riwayat, does that mean that you have to go and fulfill it immediately? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Aqim as-salat, does that mean you have to pray now? Or is there a time slot and you can pray at the end of the time? So that's why I mentioned that, just for the precision of it. You mentioned urgency, hasten, for example, hurry. That's good. Well, ask one more question, and that is ila maghfiratin. Both these words, ila and maghfiratin. What is the translation of these 2 words? Who will be our last person to participate today? Brother Jawad.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So ila means like towards or to, and the second one was maghfirah, which again is forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Ahsant. Thank you very much to those who participated. To those who didn't participate, we thank you for your presence and for doing your homework. We assume that everyone did their homework. It's very important to break up the words, to understand the words in and of themselves. We didn't ask you to figure out whether the word is past tense, present tense. Is it future? Is there a command? Break down the pronouns. But if you do know these little tidbits of the grammar as well, it's very helpful. Okay, so it is time for the adhan, so I'm going to assume that Sayyid Kamil will go and pray, so I will have some time to go into the tafsir or into the tadabbur aspect of what we're going, of this ayah 132 of Surah Al-Imran. So in the beginning of the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned in the last session, He addresses the believers. We said this was important. When we want to do tadabbur, we don't just want to look at this one ayah in isolation. We're not just looking at ayah 132 or 133 for that matter. One of the reasons why we can't just look at ayah 132 is because the ayah begins with a waw. The ayah says wa'ati'u. Waw means end. So end is connecting this sentence to a previous sentence. So what's going on in the previous sentence? And even there, we see that this sentence is connected to another sentence. But what sentence is that connected to? You don't just start a sentence with and or so. These are connecting words. They're connecting us to something else. We find in 130, as we mentioned last week, the ayah begins with Ya ayyuhal ladhina aman. You see, we didn't do anything crazy here. This wasn't anything that was out of the ordinary, that we went back to the previous ayah to find out what the context of the verse is. And when we're doing tadabbur, these are the kind of things that are to be expected. That you can't just look at the one ayah and say, let's figure out what this one portion is trying to say on its own. It was famous that before the Islamic Revolution in Iran, there were some communists that would take ayah 17 and 18, or the end of 17 and ayah 18, that said, وَبَشِّرْ عِبَادْ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلِ وَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. If I quoted it correctly, they take this and they would try to do tafsir of these little portions of the verses and say, see, the end of 17 and ayah 18 is saying that give glad tidings to the people, meaning all of us, who hear every and any word, they hear all the words, and they follow the best of them. What this means is that go listen to every opinion that exists and you go choose the best opinion that's out there. And then they said, based on that, come and listen to what we, the communists, have to say. And if you like what we're saying, come and follow us. يَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. So obviously you want to go and look at what the context of this ayah is saying. Right? Is it what the communists are saying, or is there some context to it? How do you find the context of the ayah? Go find out where this ayah is placed in the verse. Anyway, this is one of the ways. So I wanted to show you that, see, when we're doing tadabbur, look at the kind of things that we're doing. We're looking at the two verses before it to find out who is being addressed. So who is being addressed? The believers. This is important. We are being addressed. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. And because we want to focus on this ayah, we can't go back and open up ayyuhal ladhina amanu. I believe in the last session I did talk about it though, about qalat al-a'rabu amanna. We went to Surah Hujarat and we spoke about how if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to people as being believers, it's because they are. It's because the quality of, when I say quality, I mean the trait of being a believer has actually entered their hearts. If not, وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانَ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ or فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. If it's not the case that Iman has entered your heart, Allah won't refer to the group as being believers. Meaning, the people who Allah is addressing, this is not a group of people that simply is claiming to believe just like that for the sake of, some extra cash. These people actually believe. Now that you believe, Allah is saying, this is a message for you. In Surah Hujarat, in fact, every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses a group, in every single ayah that begins with Ya ayyuha, He says Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. Until you arrive at ayah 13, if I'm not mistaken, or around there, where He says Ya ayyuhan nas, meaning that in all the other ayat where He addressed a group of people, He was specifically addressing believers, ayyuhal ladhina amanu. When He got to ayah 13, He said, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu, inna akramakum 'inda Allahi atqakum. This message that the best of you are those who are the most God conscious, the ones who have the most taqwa, is a message for all of humanity. This is important. Who is Allah addressing? So Allah is addressing the believers and He's saying obey. We said that the word ita'a, I asked the brother Ali Mahdi, I think, about the word obey. He's saying obey Allah. What is this obedience? Is it any type of obedience? Is it this type of obedience, ita'a, is different from another type of obedience which we call ittiba'. You maybe heard the word tabi' or tabi'in or taba'iyya. Ittiba', this also means to follow. You're following the footsteps of someone. You're accepting someone's command. In ittiba', with an ayn at the end, you're not necessarily following a leader. You're not necessarily following a superior. There's a following involved, right? There's some sort of obedience involved. But when we use the word obedience in particular, maybe over there you would say following, actually, not obedience. There you would say following. When we use the English word obedience or the Arabic word ita'a, we specifically mean the following of someone who is lower in their rank, someone who is higher in their rank. The following of lower to the one who is higher, meaning the one who is higher is giving a command and the one who is lower is obeying that command. And when the one who is obeying that command is obeying, he's obeying with 1, humility, 2, with a sense of desire towards that obedience. With a sense of desire of obeying. Yeah, that obeying is being done with obedience, with the desire. There's this willingness to obey. It's being done out of free will, and it's with humility as well, meaning that the position of that individual is lower. This is what we want to say about ati'u. Ati'u Allah. There's a little bit of a technical discussion that happens here with regards to whether or not this command is mawlawi or irshadi. I don't want to open this up because we only have a limited time to go through the tadabbur of the ayat. But in a nutshell, there's a difference between a command or a prohibition being mawlawi or irshadi. In a nutshell, irshadi means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that which I'm commanding you to do, you already know. Your intellect already commands you to this. When I'm commanding you, this is not a new command. This is me saying, refer to the command of your intellect. You as a human being already understand that ita'ah is only for Allah. Or at the very least you understand, ita'ah is for Allah. Obedience of someone lower to someone higher definitely applies to the case of you as the creature, you as the servant, towards whom? The creator, towards the one who is worthy of servitude, the one who is worthy of worship. In the discussion on ita'ah, for those of you who remember, we had a discussion on Tawheed, where we said that we have Tawheed in Allah's essence, Dhat, in His attributes, Sifat, in His actions, Af'al. Then we had a discussion on Tawheed in Ita'ah. Or we had different categories. We said Ubudiyya, for example, in Ibadah. My screen crashed. I hope that doesn't affect the call. You probably still hear me, inshallah. But yes, Tawheed in Ita'ah. Tawheed in Ita'ah as opposed to Shirk in Ita'ah means that you recognize that it's only Allah that is worthy of being obeyed. Meaning, no other command of anyone except Allah or that individual whom has received permission from Allah to be worthy of being obeyed. Obey the one who has received idhn, permission from Allah to be obeyed. The obedience of anyone else is the obedience of ghayr Allah. And that obedience is, in fact, tantamount to shirk in ita'ah. Only Allah is worthy of being obeyed and is the only one that can be obeyed. The obedience of anyone else makes no sense. Allah is the superior. We are the ones who are meant to obey Allah. So ati Allah. Because the next discussion takes more time to open about the obedience of the Rasul, we won't go into it, and the connection of Allah wa Rasul. In our last session, we did ask the brothers and sisters to think about why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ati'u Allah wa Rasul, and not Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasul. You brothers and sisters remember in the ayah of Ulil Amr, we said Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasula wa ulil amri minkum. Twice. Repetition of the verb ati'u. It doesn't come a second time. Why is it that Allah didn't bring that word here? This is important. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just bring the word to add a word into the Quran. Over there we wanted to add a word. No, there's a reason why the word isn't mentioned here. One final point we can mention with regards to the beginning of the ayah that doesn't take up too much time, is the importance of obeying the commandments of Allah and the commandments of Allah that come through the messenger in particular, in order for our success. The backdrop of the ayah, or that which the Mufassirin mention with regards to this ayah, is specifically the case of the Battle of Uhud. If you remember, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he commanded 50 archers to stay on this sort of hill, and he said, don't come down from the hill no matter what happens on the ground. No matter what you see happening, don't come down. This is my order to you. If you want success, you stay where I tell you to stay. And these individuals stay, until at one point they say, well, what's the matter here? Everyone is grabbing the war booty, everyone's grabbing the ghanaim, everyone's grabbing all of the whatever merchandise is left behind, whether that's weapons or if they left their pouches of gold or whatever they have, the mushrikeen left behind, they're going and grabbing all their shares. Why should we not grab our shares? And they leave their position. Here we see the hikmah of the command of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that when he says stay no matter what, this is not just the command of someone who knows war strategy. This is the command of someone who is higher than you, meaning you as someone who is lower, with humility and with desire towards following him, listen to his word to a T. For dot by dot of his command, make sure you follow that which he is saying. Because in his command is your success. And you find that if there was any loss on the day of Uhud, it was a direct result of not obeying the Rasul. This ita'ah of the Rasul wasn't there. Your success comes from the obedience of the Holy Prophet. This is something that was very important. I believe Sayyid should be ready. If there are any questions, I'll take any questions. Otherwise, I'll mention another point. You can just turn on your microphones and begin speaking. We don't have much time to go through that. No, you first. Whoever wants to go first can go first. Otherwise, I'll mention one more point and then I'll...
Please continue with the content till the end of week 2, inshallah.
You want me to continue?
For a bit longer, inshallah, so you can cover the content till the end of week 2.
Okay. If that's the case, then if there are any questions, I'll take the questions. Huh? No?
Assalamu alaikum. This is Iqbal. I have a question. You touched upon the ayah saying there's only one atiu for Allah and Rasul. Would you please explain why there is only one atiu? Is it the same ita'at, or is it, because in other words you pointed out it was separate? So I'm a little confused on that.
Does anyone have an answer for the brother's question? Ahsan, it's a good question. Which is actually my question. This is the question I had as well. Does anyone have an answer? An answer meaning that this is something you've arrived at. Like, you can be wrong. It's okay. What do you think? Bismillah.
Can I try? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just going to attempt and say maybe the command of Allah is the command of Rasul, and it's all one command. It is that flows through from Allah to Rasul. So whatever Rasul is saying is from Allah.
Ahsan, very good. Very good. Does anyone want to add to that? In one sentence, you summarized it very well. We're told, مَنْ يُطِعَ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. Whoever obeys the Rasul has in fact obeyed Allah. There is no difference in the obedience of the Prophet and the obedience of Allah. They're not two different commands that are being given. One is being given from Allah, one is being given from the Prophet. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. In Surah Najm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks, he's not speaking from himself. When he speaks, everything he's telling you is from me, is wahi. When he's speaking, it's all 100% complete reality. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. It's not from himself. When he gives you a command, whatever he commands you to do is my command. Whatever he tells you to stay away from, I've told you to stay away from. That's my prohibition. Right? We have multiple ayat like this in the Quran. Well, this ita'ah of the Rasul is the ata'ah or the ita'ah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I did mention in the last session, if I'm not mistaken, that we say in the salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We don't say wa ala ali Muhammad. In other places we have wa ala ali Muhammad as well. But the salawat that we recite, the common salawat that we recite, doesn't have an ala again repeated upon Muhammad and also upon his family. We don't add an extra upon. We say Muhammad and his progeny, they're together. The salawat on the Rasul is a salawat on Ali Rasul as well. And we're told also in the riwayat that when you send salawat on the Holy Prophet, include his family, include his progeny. Don't just send salawat on the Rasul. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. No, add the Ali Muhammad as well. And when you add the Ali Muhammad, it's directly connected to the Holy Prophet. They're one and the same. Kulluhum nur wahid. They're all the same. Put them in there. What do you mean? You're just going to send salawat on the person of the Prophet himself and not on the progeny. So yes, as the brother had mentioned, that the ita'ah of the Rasul is the ita'ah of Allah. They're one and the same. Don't come and say, this is very important. Don't come and say, Hasbuna kitab Allah. Suffices for us the book of Allah. Some individuals came and said this. Some people started chanting, for example, Inil hukmu illa lillah. Hasbuna kitab Allah. No. Number one, Hasbuna kitab Allah. If the book suffices, in the book itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ati'ur Rasul. Right? Ati'ullah wa Rasul. This has come in the Quran. If the book suffices for you, the book itself is saying the messenger is important. Number two, on top of that, you can't suffice with just the book. You cannot suffice with just the book. That the book is the command of Allah. Right? This is, I don't want to open this point up, but obviously when you only have the book and you don't have the explanation of the Prophet, actually no, I will open this one. This is actually very relevant to the ayah. When you don't have the explanation of the messenger who brought the message, when you don't have his explanation next to it, you'll find that many of the verses you on your own, with your own intellect, will not be able to correctly open up and understand. There are times where you find ambiguity in the verses of the Quran. Maybe you might even find that this verse contradicts that verse, and then you just leave it at that. There we go, I found a contradiction, and God made a mistake. Right? The riwayat of the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam come to clarify these points for us. Otherwise, there's times where we get stuck when we read the Quran. The messenger is very pivotal. He plays a very pivotal role. Which takes us into the next point that we want to mention. I hope that point was clear about Hasbuna Kitabullah, that you can't say such a thing. Number one, the book itself is telling you that the Rasul plays an important role, right? And number two, you find that you get stuck when you suffice with just the book. The Rasul himself says, when the ayah says Atiyu Allah wa Rasul, that Rasul says, Inni tarikun fikumu thiqlayn, or thaqalayn, kitabullah wa itrati. The Rasul himself is saying, I've given you the book, I've given you something next to the book and those who explain the book. Anyway, moving on to the next point that I wanted to mention, which apparently we have to mention tonight instead of next week, is why I asked Brother Usher about the translation of the word Rasul. Rasul here plays a very important role. The word Rasul, when we mention his Risala in particular, this is actually very important. We didn't say Nabi, we didn't say Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We said the Rasul, meaning when you obey Allah and you also have this second obedience, which is directly linked to the first one that I mentioned, meaning this second individual that I've put in front of your eyes to obey, this person himself is important. I didn't say Ati'ullaha wa awamir al-Quran, for example, or awamir al-Quran. I didn't say and obey the commandments of the Quran. I said him. He's important. This man, this human being, this individual who I sent, obey him. Not just what he said, what he brought in the form of the book. He is important. Whatever he tells you to do, take it, and whatever he tells you to stay away from it. or we have these kind of ayat in the Quran. This individual, this man is important. This shows us the importance of his leadership, of his qiyada, of his imama, that we're supposed to be following in his footsteps. We're supposed to be looking at that which he did, the way he lived, right? Where the commandments that we receive from the Prophet are not just what he said, but rather we're looking at him in his entirety. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. That I'm looking at his character as well. I'm looking at the way he conducted himself, right? His self-conduct, the way he carried himself. That's what I meant. This is very important. This Rasul, he was a physical person. He was a living person that was amongst the people. When I follow this living individual amongst my group, through him I find my way to Allah. This is very important. That the individual has been mentioned here, has been singled out for me. Obey Allah, obey this person as well. This Rasul, very important. Ati'u Allah war Rasul. Maybe I'll mention one last point and then I'll hand it over. Is that we said la'alla. We said la'alla. See, when we say la'alla, we're saying that typically this is something that should happen, right? If I want to arrive at this goal, then I should take on this path to get to that goal, right? If someone says, I want to be skinny, well, it doesn't just come about with that statement. You say, if you want to be skinny, there are particular foods that you should eat, particular foods that you should not eat, a particular diet or regimen that you should go on, not an actual diet in the colloquial term of it, but there are certain foods that you should not be eating in order to be healthy, certain foods that you should be eating, and there's a certain plan that you should have with regards to physical exercise as well. If you go through the process, then perhaps you will arrive at this goal, typically. Sometimes we find that someone is going through the process as a result of their shortcomings. No, they don't arrive at that goal. We hope that you will arrive at that goal if you go through this process correctly. We're not giving an end-all be-all prescription where we say you do this, you've arrived at the goal. Because someone might come and say, well, on the apparent, I did do it, but I didn't arrive at the goal. We say no. The one who actually undergoes this prescription correctly and actually follows it to a T will arrive at the goal. The one who on the apparent comes and says, I believe, I read the Quran, I follow the commandments of the Prophet, and this individual has shortcomings, yeah, that person is not going to arrive at the goal. There are more explanations to la'alla that I could bring that I will personally refrain from due to the time that we have. Maybe in the WhatsApp group, I can mention a few more points on la'alla. But the gist or the summary of what we mentioned today is as follows. We said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the believers. He is telling those who already believe that they should obey Allah. He's commanding them in the command tense, ati'u, obey Allah. We said the obedience of Allah is something that we naturally understand. Because ita'a means the obedience of someone lower to someone who is higher. And we naturally understand that obedience is necessarily for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is superior. Then we said that the Allah who is superior is the only one who is worthy of being obeyed, except for those individuals who have been granted permission to be in that position of commanding. And therefore we follow those individuals and their commands as well. And then we said that those commands of those individuals who have received permission from Allah to be in that position, in fact, their commands are no different from the commands of Allah. They're directly connected. And it's for this reason that we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects the Rasul to Allah, meaning the ita'ah of the Rasul is the ita'ah of Allah. And he didn't repeat the verb or the command tense of ati'u for the Rasul. Then we said that the word Rasul has pivotal importance as well. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't choose another word because the risala of the Nabi is important here. When we say, oh, sorry, I actually didn't open this point up. This is very important that I missed. That the risala of the Nabi is important. When he says obey the Rasul, what does the Rasul bring? The Rasul brings the Sharia. Following the Prophet means following the Sharia that he brings. How do you follow the Prophet? By following that which he has instructed you to do. What is it that he has instructed you to do? That which is in the Sharia. That's very important. the laws of Islam. So obey Allah. Obeying Allah is seen in what form? In obeying the Prophet. Obeying the Prophet means what? Why do I obey this messenger? What is it that I'm following? The risala that he's brought. The risala is that sharia. And I'm also looking at the sunnah of the Prophet, how he lived. He's the best example that has been given to me. And I'm looking at his example to conduct my life. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. So that perhaps I'll arrive at the goal of receiving mercy. That mercy will be shown to me. This portion of the ayah, inshallah, will cover next week. And then, obviously, once we conclude لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, we'll also enter into ayah 133. And I believe in the next week's session, we'll wrap up 133 as well. And from the week after that, I will not be the instructor of the tadabbur portion for that week. We'll enter into Surah Anfal, inshallah, and we'll tell you the homework of what to prepare. The brothers and sisters, inshallah, will look at ayah 133. Those who haven't memorized the translation or haven't looked into the translation, please do so for next week. Those who have, revise it and go over it. This is very important. And think about these ayat and what they could possibly mean. The questions that we ask, go ahead and give it a thought of what you think the ayah might be referring to. You don't have to be right when you do tadabbur. What could the ayah possibly be saying? Think about it. Let your intellects, let the gears grind a little bit. There's no problem in that. Think, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking of me? Then you come in next session, you say, I thought of this, and then we'll have a discussion on it. We'll figure out, is it possible that what you're saying is correct, or maybe for some reason, no, you're completely off. We'll find out. This is the whole point of the discussion that we have. Inshallah, we'll try to make it more interactive from next session and hear more from you all. Thanks to those who participated, who turned on their microphones. And inshallah, we will speak again next week. Please revise and go over ayah 132 and 133. And inshallah, we'll conclude this portion of the tadabbur in our next session, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. I see in the chat messages, Brother Kumar Hassan has said that he has a question. Inshallah, maybe you can post that question on the WhatsApp group, and then Brother Hussein can respond to you there. Last week, we started talking about getting to know ourselves better, really. And we talked about this idea that we have a nafs. We gave some explanations of what we mean when we say that we have a nafs, right? And this I that exists, the oneness of it, the lack of division within this I, right? And then we talked about the faculties and tried to explain through an experiential lens the faculties of this particular I. Then on the WhatsApp group, I had posted a question, and alhamdulillah, many of you guys participated. I think almost all of you guys participated. That was really good. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that activity. We'll continue with that activity this week as well. And the question I posed was very much linked to the talk of today, right? The talk of today is the real me. And the question I posed was regarding this idea of purity and decreasing the error ratio of the intellect, really. Right? So consider these two concepts in your mind in the talk of the discussion before as you go throughout this particular unit today. So, as mentioned before as well, and I'll reiterate it, that at this stage, when we ask you to respond and we ask you to quote a verse or quote a hadith with reference and so on and so forth, we're not saying that we're going to publish this and this is the final understanding and what we're saying represents the deen in its actuality. What we're saying is no, the deen came for every single person to understand, right? You're baligh, you have capacity to understand the deen, right? And us, we're trying to make attempts at understanding this deen. We're trying to make an attempt at trying to see how our understanding falls in line with the verses and the riwayat that are present. So the first item to discuss today is the item of composed entities and non-composed entities. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? It says my internet is unstable, unfortunately, over here. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So we have composed entities and non-composed entities. For example, if you imagine an apple, right? An apple has the skin to it, the pulp inside it, the seed, the stem, even the skin itself has different pigmentations and difference in color. The contents inside also are divisible, and these parts come together and compose of this particular apple. So some entities are like that. But when you consider this entity of the I, when you consider this entity that we established that you associated last time with yourself, whether you were 9-year-old or 10-year-old or 15-year-old or 40-year-old or 50-year-old, right? That I remain the same, right? As well as the experiences that I felt. It's not that that I is composed. That I goes through associates, meaning it has things that are associated to it. For example, when that I has associates, we change that I to the word my in the English language, for example. So my phone, my hand, my intellect, and then you go further and you say, well, my experiences, my experience, my knowledge, and so on and so forth. Okay. So each of those examples that I gave have a different type of attribution to the I, but more of that you can think of on your own time, inshallah. So the I itself is not a composed reality in the sense that when I consider that I, right, with the tool of intellect again, because if I'm trying to consider a metaphysical entity, then I have to use a metaphysical tool to consider it. If I consider this I with the tool of intellect, right, I realize that this I is not something that is composed of parts. It's not like it has, this I itself does not have parts to it. It's associated with a body which has parts, that's true, right? So I have my hand, my feet, and so on and so forth. But this I itself has oneness to it. And this oneness is such that it's not a composed oneness. Okay? So this oneness, although is associated with multiplicity, but within it has a unicity to it, right? So this is an important understanding that this I now, this nafs of ours, we're learning about one attribute of it, that it's not a composed thing. We talked previously about the fact that, well, this nafs has 4 faculties, but we want to remind you that we said that those are 4 capacities of this I. So while the I remains as one thing, it has 4 capacities. And just to bring closer our understanding regarding this concept, we mentioned that my hand, my fingertips, right, while being one thing, can have 4 very different actions associated with them. For example, I could feel coldness and hotness, and that's one item that I could feel from them, right? One capacity of theirs. I could also feel sharpness or dullness. That's another capacity of the same one hand, right? And so on and so forth. We give slipperiness and rigidness of a particular surface. So I give some more examples as well. And we recognize that oneness of the hand doesn't limit it from being associated with multiple capacities. In a very similar manner, that oneness that you experience from the I, that nafs, right, doesn't inhibit it, nor does it limit it from being associated with multiplicity, with multiple things. Now, those things at times are external to your body, even like my car, my phone, and so on and so forth. Sometimes those things are associates of the body, so like my hand, my eyes, my feet, and so on and so forth. And sometimes those associates are the capacities themselves. Now, when I'm focusing on an aspect of the I, right, I consider it as something different from the I. But it's not, huh? My intellect, right? My experience, right? My understanding, right? Although this understanding is what makes me up, this intellect is part of that I, but it's not part in the sense of being composed. It's an important concept to understand. So you can have unicity, you can have this oneness of the I, but that doesn't inhibit it from having associates in the multiplicity. Okay. Why is this important for us to understand? Well, it's very much linked to our capacity of understanding our Rabb, right? So we have the idea of Tawheed, we have the idea of oneness, right? And then we have the idea of the association of the unicity, the oneness, the Tawheed, in the multiplicity, in this dunya as well. Right? There is Tawheed present. Right? It's not the case that these items are independent of Allah existing. Rather, Allah is absolutely dominant, has ihata over all of these things that are around us. One example of this idea called of how one item which is indivisible, which is unique, which is non-composed, how it associates with multiplicity is the association of the I with its associates, for example. We'll cover this more in the discussion to come, inshallah. Okay. The discussion to come in the WhatsApp channel. So last week we looked at a verse as well. So if I can ask you guys to open chapter number 23, verse number 14. And we said over there, ثم خلقنا نطفة وعلقة فخلقنا علقة مضغة فخلقنا مضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse is describing that he created, then we created the drop from a fluid of a clinging mass, then we created the clinging mass from a fleshy tissue, then we created the fleshy tissue as bones, and we clothed these bones with flesh. And then he says, ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. So this خلقا آخر, we explained that to be the nafs. He said this is now not the physical entity, but the metaphysical entity of this particular creation. And after this خلقا آخر was done, this another creature was created, right, within the with the capacity and with the physical body as it was being created, right? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. After this particular creation at this level, right? Now this attribute of Allah, the أحسن الخالقين, is displayed in this particular creature, right? فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Now, the question arises that, well, we do experience that we have a body and then we have a soul. So then which one is the real one? And we hinted at it before. We said that there's no duality in the sense that the body is independent of. So the question on the chat has been asked, is this second creation something akin to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blew into Hazrat Adam and asked the angels to bow? So this particular thing that's talking about ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ, this is not specifically talking about Nabi Adam, right? This is talking about the creation of man. So when it comes to the association of the nafs to the body, right? It's not the case that we had nafs living on their own somewhere and then a body was created and then the nafs was told, hey, come associate with this body now, right? A better way of understanding is like the body was the flower pot, right? From which the tree, which would be the nafs in this analogy, sprung to life. So after the nutfa and the mudgha and the alqa and the idam came about, the bones came about, and then the meat was put on the bones and so on and so forth, right, in the womb, right? There comes a time when from that flower pot, that physical clump, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala originates a creature there. ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ, that who is pointing towards that particular thing that was there, the clump, right? ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر. That particular flower pot was then made into something that holds a tree as well, right? So in the coming about, the nafs is something that is a phenomenon. So it's something that occurs, right? It was not forever. It occurs, comes into being, right? And today's question is that, well, does it have an ending to it or not, right? So it has a starting point, but does it have an ending point to it or not? So, for example, in our philosophy, we say that Islamic philosophy, we believe that, and we go through the proofs of this in its own place, that the nafs is jismaniyatul huduth wa ruhaniyatul baqa. We believe that the jism itself is something that came about with the help of the body, as this verse is explaining right here, right? And then in terms of its prevalence after the body, we have an explanation that states, both textually and intellectually, that this nafs does not necessitate the linkage with this body. And so it's possible for this nafs to exist later on as well. And that's what we're going to cover today as well. So is my soul the body? I am so after that. It's not, I'm part of it. So another question was asked, so is my soul the body I will have in barzakh, when we die, but it's not a part of my body? So as I stated, that it's not like that you have a physical component and the metaphysical component coming together like two hands coming together like this, right? Because if you have a physical component, the only thing that can come together with it like this is another physical component, right? The intibaq, the coming together of these two components, requires that these components have a similar attribute amongst them. For example, if I told you, can you please put Sunday beside red? You'll just look at me and say, well, Sunday is the day of the week and red is the color. They don't have a unifying attribute such that I could put them beside one another. Or if I tell you, can you please put Sunday beside this laptop in front of you? Well, you can't. A Sunday is a day and the laptop is a physical entity, and this conceptual entity and the physical entity cannot come together. Such a thing is impossible. Right? So when we're talking about the nafs and the body, we're talking about the idea of the oneness of the nafs with the body, right? In the sense that the body is an associate but not composed. That's what I covered in the beginning of this class. That the nafs has oneness to it. It is an entity which is created from the body in its initiation stages. That's true, right? When it comes to its association with the body, this association does not mean it is a physically composed entity. So, for example, if you consider your association with your phone, and you say my phone, right? There is a connection between you and your phone, but does it necessarily have to be a physical connection? Does it have to be part of you? No, it doesn't. Association can exist without composition being there, right? So a key point to take away is this. A second point to answer your questions you've asked here is, yes, in this particular world, my nafs comes within the form of this particular body, right? Its associate is one form which translates in the material world as this face, as this hand, and this body, and so on and so forth. But in the hereafter, in particular barzakh, right, where the material realm ceases to exist, then the capacity to take on multiple forms comes about. At that particular stage, every action that I committed has its own form, right? And we have those forms listed in the riwayat of what they look like and so on and so forth, right? So when it comes to the forms that are present, the nafs takes on the forms of those particular actions. You have multiple forms there, right? A person committed a certain type of action, that particular action will manifest itself in a particular form and so on and so forth. Right? So these two components are important to understand. Let's go further. So which one is the real me? At a very initial stage and an initial way of understanding, I see that I'm associated to this body and I have a nafs, and so far I'm claiming that the nafs is the real one. Well, let's go see what the Holy Quran when it's trying to talk to us and refer us to the perpetuity, the the long lifeness of ourselves. How does it refer to us? If you open up verse 27 of Surah 89, right? It's a very famous verse that we all read typically in Muharram time and especially near Ashura, right? As it has an association towards Abu Abdullah as well. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now calling upon man to return to him, let's look at the words that he uses, right? He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna. So when he's talking to that particular person, he's talking to the essence and the essential oneness of that person, the nafs of that person. Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna. Okay. And then when Allah is commanding that particular person to come back to him, right? The physical body can't return because the physical body, right, is bound to the three dimensions and time and its own particular place. This is something that does not decays and so on and so forth. It is not something that is metaphysical, right? Irja'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. So the nafs is being asked to now return towards his Rabb, right? So after the shedding of the body, after now the death coming about, right, or the shahada in the case of Abu Abdullah, right, coming about, that nafs is being told to now return to the Rabb, right? And then there's much more to be said regarding this return and regarding the title Radiyah and regarding the title Mardiyah. Both of them have very deep meanings here and can be opened up significantly. But the point that we want to stick to is that when we're told to return, it's the nafs that's been asked to come back. Let's look at another passage. Surah number 82, verse number 18 and verse number 19. This particular passage shows that this eye of ours exists in the day of judgment. It says that at the very least, this nafs of ours is capable of. So sorry, Jawad, the chapter I had mentioned before, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna, is chapter 89, verse 27 and verse 28. And now I'm talking about chapter 82, verse 19 and verse 18 and verse 19. So this passage here shows that the nafs itself, right, exists on the day of judgment. Okay, no problem. So ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا وأمر يومئذ لله. There's no comment. Okay, so again, what will show you what is the day of retribution? It is a day when no soul will be of any avail to another soul, and all command that day will belong to Allah. Again, when we're talking about our entity at the level of the Yawmuddin, the day of judgment, that which is the essence of us is being talked about, which is the nafs. Okay. The third passage that I want you guys to consider is chapter 81. Okay. Verse number 12, verse number 13, and verse number 14. So when we're talking about the Yawmul Hisab here, Qiyamah, right? Again, the nafs is the one that's being put on the podium to decide what the situation is going to be, right? So if you look at verse number 14, alimat nafsum ma ahbarat, right? Then a soul shall know what it has readied for itself, right? At the stage when what? When the hellfire is set ablaze and the paradise is brought near. So it's definitely talking about this Yomul Hisab, right? The nafs will know that what it has sent forward for itself, what it has readied for itself. Okay, so here's three passages that we looked at from the Holy Quran that indicate to us that on the day of judgment, right? This nafs of ours is the one that's being dealt with. This nafs of ours is the one that's being considered, and the criterion for our success or lack thereof is then again the nafs. Now let's support that with another text from the Holy Quran. Look at verse number 9 and verse number 10 from chapter number 91. Okay. قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. Right? One who purifies it, and this it is referring, if you look at the previous verses, to the nafs. One who purifies the nafs, then this particular person is zakaha. This particular person is aflaha. Sorry, he's felicitous. And the one who who fails really, man dassaha, is the one who faqad khaba, the one who betrays, the one who neglects this particular nafs. Okay. So we had talked about this idea of purification, right? Zakkaha, tazkiyah, right? We had talked about this idea of failure in the WhatsApp chat, right? So you have a deeper understanding of that concept with you and what that means in terms of your faculties and so on and so forth. Bring that to the forefront of your mind, and let's cover the last item for today. So if now the criterion for purification to see if I'm a successful person or not a successful person and so on and so forth, right? Because this idea of purification in this verse, verse number 9, is associated now, right, with success. So if you've purified it, then you've reached success. And if you haven't, then, well, you haven't reached success, right? So why is the criterion for success now purification of this nafs? So I want to open that up for you guys a little bit. Consider if the criterion for success was other than the nafs. What will be other than the nafs? Well, for you, it will be anything that is an associate of the nafs, right? Because if we are the nafs and there's oneness in it, then anything other than that we claim to have, quote unquote, is an associate of this I. Okay. So if the associate of the I was the criterion for a success or failure, so for example, the person who has the best house, the person who has the best car, if this was the criterion for success and the criterion for failure, right, we'd be in trouble. Because that success is innately part of that associated being, not the nafs itself. Right? Innately, that particular success lies with the associated being. So if I feel that because I own a bigger house, I am more successful, right? Then that success is not necessarily mine. It's stemming from that bigger house, right? This is an opposition of if I was to purify my nafs and create my faculties such that my desire and anger and my control, right? In that situation, it's not an associate of mine which grants me merit. It is myself that grants me it. Right? So my phone, my house, my spouse, and so on and so forth, my achievements in terms of the physical achievements of this world, a job, so on and so forth, right? These are not the criterion nor are they the merit for success. It's true that you can succeed in getting a good job. You should succeed in trying to maintain a good house. You should succeed in trying to have the best of families. Those are all true. But those are all true when those particular items, those associates, are linked with the success of your nafs. Right? Here we're opening up a very important concept that of one of apparent value and actual value. So on the apparent sense, having a house, having a car, good house, having a good spouse, a good kids, having a good phone, having a good body, really taking care of it and exercising and so on and so forth. These all have appearances of good. They're all apparently good. Right? You have to strive towards them. But what makes them actually good is if they have a direct impact on your nafs. Right? If they have a direct impact on your nafs, then they become actually good. So if I attribute now having a good family and I consider it in terms of my four faculties, right? that I'm actually dealing with this family based on my intellect, not based on just my desire, nor just based on my anger, right? And my intellect tells me that I have to be subservient to the rules of Allah. I have to do ati'ullah wa rasul, remember, right? So my intellect comes with this particular understanding, right? Then what happens? Well, then my relationship with this family, while maintaining an apparently good family, it becomes actually good for me too, because now it has a direct impact on the tazkiyah, the purification of my nafs. Why and how? Well, in my family, situations will arrive in which my anger and my desire or my imaginative faculty will come forth and tell me, act this way or that way, act in this particular manner or that particular manner, and look, do it as a response to this particular action too. So my spouse didn't listen to me, or I felt they were being rude to me, the imaginative faculty, right? Or uh, um, my spouse wants to take off their hijab and I like them so much, therefore, like my shahwat might come and say, well, just because you like them so much, it's okay to put a blind eye towards this, let her take her hijab off now. Okay, for example, be okay with it, right? The opposite as well, and these concepts are important to consider, right? The same goes for the husband scenario as well. So the wife will see that my husband doesn't necessarily pay khums with his money. Doesn't necessarily careful with how his income is coming, if his income is in line with this understanding of Tawheed or not, right? Is Tawheed something that plays into his actual actions of getting that income? Does he consider that or no? And so on and so forth, right? So as our shahwa might come forth and say, you know what, you like this person so much, um, um, put a blind eye to that particular action. Don't work towards that. Right? You're fine with that. Be neutral regarding that in your person. Right? Now, the intellect, if it's something that's subservient towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's something that is trying to do this ita'ah of Allah, right? Comes here and puts shahwa and ghadab and waham in their places. So you know what? It's not the case that I'm going to act out and lash out if they didn't listen to me, right? No, I will appropriately address the situation. Right? I'm not going to ignore it, but I won't lash out either. Right? It addresses the shahwa. It says, you know what? You're calling me towards being passive and neutral entirely while something that I know to be wrong is happening. And no, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to make a proper intellectual plan that goes towards a solution. I'm not going to go from one extreme to the other. I'm not going to say in the sense of stopping my shahwa, I go towards ghadab. Try to stop this faculty of desire, right? I go towards the ghadab faculty, the other extreme. We have the riwayah from Muhammad ﷺ that you will not see a jahil except that he will be in one extreme or the other. And you can apply that particular riwayah here, right? That somebody and jahil is what? The lack of intellect, right? So somebody who has the lack of this intellect, well, by definition, they'll go from one extreme, which is absolutely becoming absorbed in their shahwa, right, towards the other extreme, being absorbed in their ghadab. To try to solve the issue of the shahwa, they'll get stuck with the issue of a ghadab. To solve the issue of ghadab, they'll go towards the issue of shahwa, right? But somebody who is not a jahil now, so the implied message in the hadith from the Imam, right? Somebody who's not a jahil now, somebody who has worked on their intellect, does what? Well, he's neither in one extreme nor the other, right? He doesn't get played by the faculty of desire, nor does he get played by the faculty of anger. Rather, he controls them both, right? So the criterion of success, now making that apparently good family actually good, is that throughout the day when the instances arrive for anger to come and display its own wants and shahwat to come and display its own wants and waham to come and display its own action, and I'll talk about waham in a bit, right? Well, the intellect comes here and says, wait a second, let me assess this in a proper manner. With this understanding that I am an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this family unit is meant to purify me, really, to provide for me the different situations in which I can display and acquire, really, right, and manifest in the 24 hours the dominance of my aql in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? and not obeying my own desire or my own anger or my own wahm, and so on and so forth, right? So here now this family, after this intellect goes upon, like a person uses their intellect in this particular way, and this family ends up becoming actually good. This was one example for the family. The same thing applies for your house, your phone, and so on. So wants to binge watch 3 hours of YouTube, right? Or see things on that are very explicit and they know they shouldn't be seen, right? Now, neither 3 hours of YouTube nor binge watching something else to an extreme level, those can't be justified with the idea and the notion, which is true, of halal entertainment. Halal entertainment does not mean wastage of time. 1 hour, okay, you can associate with it. In 1 hour, I was getting some entertainment to kind of relax myself and so on and so forth. But logically speaking, no one will consider that 3 hours of binge watching was, not a waste of time, right? So now when it comes to the intellect, this nafs of mind dealing with this associate, this phone, even there now I consider uh, if my shahwat faculty was to dominate me, and in this associate, my shahwat ran the show, and I was on the phone whenever I felt like it, for however long that I felt like it, then this phone, even though it's apparently good, let's say it's like the latest model out there, it's not actually good for me. It's an actual defect for me, right? Because it's not creating that strength in the nafs. The criterion for the success is not being met, right? قَدْ أَفْلَهَا مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The purification, i.e., the assertive dominance of the intellect in controlling the shahwa and the anger is not taking place, as well as the waham too. Okay. So, last point to consider today before we end it off, I think we have about 5 minutes left, is an example of how the waham faculty comes about and how the intellect should associate and control that. There'll come a time where a husband or a wife might think that, might have thoughts to their person, right? That, oh, I don't feel that I'm successful, or I'm not growing spiritually, or I'm not growing financially, or I'm not a very successful person in my life, and so on and so forth. This feeling would come about, right? Now, the feeling is pushing yourself, so just go into this idea of depression and being sad and being really upset and so on and so forth. Right? The intellect should come in these scenarios, in these situations, really, and say, you know what, we do have a criteria for assessment. Let's assess: am I truly somebody who's successful or not? Right? And then the intellect brings about the criterion for success from its owner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Says, you know what? I feel the lack of success. Why is it? Okay. Is it because, for example, I live in a world where I'm being bombarded with information that if I don't have a certain level of a car or a certain type of a house or a certain standard of living, then that equates to not being successful? Is this particular information being fed from me somewhere? Because that's not the intellect's understanding when it uses the explanations from his Rabb, when he uses the explanation from the one that he's trying to ita'a towards, right? He says, you know what, wait a second, maybe the definition of these words such as success and so on and so forth, I've got them backwards. So the intellect can come and now assess that. Now the intellect assessment there is the first step. It's not the final step, but it's the first step of neglecting and ignoring the waham. As a person starts to neglect and ignore the waham, the capacity to ignore it increases further. As your intellect tones down the volume button on the waham's input, right? The capacity to tone it down further is given to that intellect, and so on and so forth. So as it lifts more weight, as it tries to ignore intrusive thoughts, the capacity to ignore more thoughts is given and actually comes to that. That's the strength of the intellect, right? So this notion that, well, if I ignore intrusive thoughts, these intrusive thoughts will only come and they will develop further and further and further. In some cases, perhaps there's something else going on there, right? In those cases, the intrusive thoughts, the cause of them is increasing. So your intellect needs to go and figure out what the cause of those intrusive thoughts are, right? But in most cases, If the cause is something that is an imaginative cause, it's not a real cause, right? And the ignoring of those intrusive thoughts allows for the intellect to grow. And hence, now that faculty which was there to show you those bandits, to show you potential problems and harms and so on and so forth, if you didn't have this faculty, you'd be in trouble. You needed the vaham, you needed the imaginative faculty. This apparently good faculty now all of a sudden takes its true position in your person, right? Your intellect comes and can manage it, and hence you have done what? You've purified yourself. You've purified yourself from imbalance, right? And the output, the adab, the hellfire, and all the just desserts of an imbalance is exactly that. They're the just desserts of an imbalance. It's not like an external fire is given to you, rather that imbalance itself at the higher level is hellfire. Right? So at the lower level, for example, how we have in the hadith, at the lower level, backbiting occurs. At the higher level, this backbiting manifests in the eating of the flesh of your brother. Right? So that disgust, if you see that disgust, that particular thing you understand, at that higher level, a way of explaining the disgust at that level would be this, for example. How disgusting is eating the flesh of your brother, a dead body of your brother in this world? That's how disgusting of a thing backbiting is in the higher level, right? In a very similar manner, right? Um, uh, once you start to, once the reverse of that, now once you start to purify yourself in this dunya, bring balance to your faculties, at the higher level, this manifests as heaven, right? It is the heaven, right? One level of it, one aspect of it. At the lower level, it manages itself as question asked here. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. The imaginative faculty balances the intellect, the negative direction being it created doubt and the positive being. So the intellectual faculty comes and balances the intellectual faculty. The job of the intellect is to manage and balance the other three faculties, the faculty of desire, the faculty of anger, and the faculty of shahwa. Sorry, the faculty of imaginative faculty. So your intellectual faculty comes and brings balance to these things, these three other faculties, doesn't let them become imbalanced. Okay, and the negative direction, the imbalance of it, right, is exactly what hellfire is at the higher level. The negative direction being it created doubt and positive. Okay, so the negative direction being that it created doubt, meaning it gave you an area to ponder. Remember the example we gave of the hunting party, and the scout's job was to make sure there's no bandits out there, right? So you need that scout to tell you that there's a potential of bandits here, right? But if the scout was like not doing their job, every tree they saw, they said, you know what, there's potential of bandits here, right? Then you'd have a max inflow of this comment of there's a potential of bandits here behind this tree and that tree, and that will make your hunting party not succeed because you'll be crippled really, right? Because you'll be like, I'm surrounded by bandits. Well, there's no bandits at all, right? So the imaginative faculty provides for you the opportunity to assess. But if it provides that opportunity to assess incorrectly and does like a DNS attack on you, really, like you get bombarded with negative thoughts, intrusive thoughts, and so on and so forth, right? If you don't manage them appropriately, your whole being kind of shuts down. While having these chances to reassess, to consider the scenario in a different manner, right? They're important for your growth, but the overdoing of those is not, right? So you see the positive aspect is the intellect is like that scout, the capacity to see and predict certain bandits from being there is important, right? So for example, I'm in my house and I'm dealing with my kids. My daughter is 8 years old, right? Not everything is us as people who are from India, Pakistan, Arab world, Asia, right? Um, we our language is considered a high context language, meaning that silences have many meanings to it, right? Emphasis on silence and eye movement and hand movement in these languages relays much more meaning, right? As opposed to other languages which are considered low context languages, meaning that if you wanted to say something, if you said 100 words, you meant 100 words in those languages, right? In high context languages, if you said 50 words, you meant 100, right? So exactly, and hence the name comes high context languages and low context languages and so on and so forth. So in the high context language that I am with my kids and so on and so forth, I see that certain actions of her, the way she's looking, the way she's my daughter, the way she's behaving, I get my imaginative faculty gets the hint that something is wrong. There's a bandit here. She seems to be upset, right? My intellectual faculty should come and assess. Now imagine if she was like doing nothing wrong, but every time she was blinking, my imaginative faculty came and told me, you know what, something is wrong. She's upset. This would lead to paranoia, right? So you could definitely see the imbalancement of the imaginative faculty. And this is an extremely important idea to understand and digest. Right? When we talk about the imaginative faculty, what do we mean? Because we deal with it daily, right? So intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts, and so on and so forth are part and parcel of this faculty, and and the management of that has methods as well. But this brings us to the conclusion of today's class. We've covered this idea that we are the nafs. We looked at some textual proof that this nafs exists beyond the body, right? We looked at how the nafs is formed. The nafs is formed with the body. It's true. As the body is being created, the nafs is created. And at that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. And then the nafs itself, according to other verses, stays well beyond the body in the hereafter, in the barzakh, in the yawm al-hisab, and so on and so forth, right? Then we talked about this idea of success and purification, the link between them from a textual point of view and an intellectual point of view, and said that, you know what, my true success should be associated with the me aspect, not the associates aspect. So the true success of a person is associated with their purification of the nafs. And then we gave an explanation of how this purification looks like in the example of the family unit, right, with ghadab, shahwat, and then at the end here, the intellectual faculty. Inshallah, hopefully today's session was informative for you. I gave examples, tried to make them as practical as possible for better understanding of how these faculties work in our 24 hours. And I'll post some questions, inshallah, on the group as well to further our discussion. If you notice, last week's question was linking to this week's content, and I will try to keep a similar trend going as well, where probing questions are posted such that they lead you towards the next item that's being presented as well, in some way related to that at least. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts this class as a small worship from us and allows for this theoretical knowledge to transcend its theory and go into our practice. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal faraj.